Hey everybody, here we are. We're going to do another tier list. This time we're doing the TNG cast, or characters I guess, not the cast. You guys I thought tier lists were 2018. No, we're bringing them back. We're bringing them back with a fresh perspective, I think. You guys wouldn't turn down a Christmas present or something like that if just because it was wrapped in old newspaper. It's what's inside that counts. So let's get to this. We're going to be ranking the TNG characters on our scale from A to F. As always, I hate the S tier. And yeah, we'll just kind of rating them against each other. We'll sort them here, and then at the end, or as we go through, we'll kind of sort them into left to right is greater to lower, so the best would be over here, and then it works kind of like that as you move down the tiers. So let's move into it. Wesley Crusher, number one. I'm going to drop him into the C just to start the process off, and then we'll go from there. I mean, the case for Wesley is that you'd have to really you have to come up with reasons why he's not here, right? Is there any reason why Wesley doesn't belong there? He's kind of an annoying performance. He's an annoying character who they kind of fixed later on by kicking off the show, I guess, if you want to think about it that way. And even when they rehabilitated him later on and came back, his thing about leaving Starfleet never really felt like it mattered too much. It felt like it was a way to just boot a character off, and then he came back in a deleted scene in Nemesis, so it is like he came back to Starfleet at some point. So even him leaving didn't really amount to anything. I don't think there's a single good Wesley episode. He's functional as a background character in some episodes, like Best of Both Worlds. He's actually pretty good in it, even though he has very little to do. I think I'm going to leave him in the F tier, though. I think he's just a failed concept of a character. Nothing screams like 80s genre show like Wesley Crusher from 1987 TNG first season. So we're going to leave him in the F tier. Troy. Troy probably belongs right here. All right, and this the D tier here. Kind of a weird character that we'll get into her being replaced later on in the second season, or they figured out a way to do her more appropriately, take that out of context. They found a way to represent that character a little bit better. She got better in the later seasons, right? Season 6, maybe Face of the Enemy, things like that. But until then, kind of a pointless character that is story-breaking in a lot of ways, so you can't actually use her in the way that her character is designed. They never really sunk into the counselor role with her. She's more like an advisor to Picard for it. And they came up with another character who became the actual counselor on the ship and more effective at it. I think Troy is a D tier. She's better than Wesley. She's not quite that bad. She has some good episodes in contrast to Wesley Crusher, who has 0 good episodes, but I think that's where she belongs. Our first guest star, Chief O'Brien, probably belongs in C, right? He's maybe not the best guest star that the show ever had. He's certainly not bad. He was good enough to go off onto his own and DS9 and things like that. I don't think in TNG you're ever excited when Chief O'Brien shows up. He's always just reliable and there, and there's nothing really wrong with him, but I'd hesitate to put him any higher or lower. He was just the one episode I think that they focused on was Data's Day, when he gets married to Keiko, or is getting ready to get married to Keiko. And even then, he's functional. I think he's just a C. TNG never had a great backing cast. It never had a great guest star list. Chief O'Brien is certainly one of those characters who's memorable and sticks around, but I don't think he's really all that great shakes. So now we get to an actual important character. It's Data. We'll put him right here for now. There's no way he's not an A, right? I mean, he's competed for one of the top spots at this point. It's either Data or somebody else, I think, and you obviously know who that other A would be. He's up there for me. Data's a great performance. Brent Spiner was terrific as Data. Even when he lost the plot in the movies, he was still pretty good. But even when he was at his worst in the movies, he was never a bad character, and he was certainly the most interesting creation the TNG had in terms of what a character is and everything like that. He sort of represents Star Trek in a lot of ways. It has the search for humanity and things. He's an interesting take on Spock, where he's kind of like Spock, but at the same time he's not, where Spock, as we talked about in the Star Trek Beyond podcast, Spock can take a joke and understand jokes, and Data is one step away, removed from being human in that regard. So he's kind of Spock, but amped up a little bit. And he has some fascinating fundamental questions about like what humanity is and what it means to be a sentient creature and things like that. And what is Data? If the Enterprise computer is smart like Data, why is it different than Data and things like that? And I think he's a really great character, really great performance, and he's one of the most memorable characters from the show. So he's going to stay up there in the A tier. Riker. On the podcast rewatch, when we watched this, my big surprise was how much I liked Riker. I think Riker's great. I think Riker is a really versatile character who could handle a lot of different stories that were thrown at him really interestingly. He can do the romance plot, he can do the action, he can do the mystery. Frakes is really great as him. He's got this really calm, cool energy where he is in charge but also very laid back with everybody else. He has a really great characterization, and he's the central focus of Best of Both Worlds. You think of it as a Picard episode because Picard gets abducted by the Borg, but it's really a Riker episode. I'm saying that kind of somewhat obviously, but he was really great. And he had a variety, and a lot of episodes were dedicated to Riker when you start going through it. But he had just a variety, and he handled everything well. And I think that that's really important for a show like this, is that you have a character, or hopefully multiple characters, who can fit into different stories and not just be always the Data question about like what is Data trying to be human or things like that, or the Troy question or the Troy episodes were always like romance things or something stupid like that. Riker could pretty much do it all, and he was a good character for those episodes. For me, he's a B. He's not quite A tier, but he's solidly right there, top of the second tier of the Star Trek TNG characters. Beverly Crusher. I'll put her right here for now. She's between a C and a D, right? So I guess we can sort of figure this out as it stands. She's not a bad character, I don't think. I think she's by far the most underutilized TNG character out of all of them. She has kind of, interestingly, the opposite problem of Riker, which is that she has a variety of episodes, but it feels like it comes across more as she always got the episodes that never felt like they fit anybody else. So she became like a detective in some stories. It's kind of like what Call Meany as Chief O'Brien in DS9 does. He gets a lot of the stories that it feels like they weren't sure who to actually give it to, so I guess we have to give an O'Brien episode. Crusher feels the same. She's a detective in some. She's sometimes a doctor. She's sometimes the mother. She's sometimes in love with Picard. But she never really felt like she was a fully developed or fleshed out character, in my opinion. I think Pulaski is actually a better character than Crusher is. Crusher functioned as the doctor character very capably, but when she had to have episodes on her own, it never really felt like it worked. And so I think just because of that, I'm going to put her here. I think she's actually even a worse character than Troy, so this sort of thing works here, where Troy had a couple good episodes. I don't really know what the best Crusher episode would be. Maybe Attached or something like that. Even then, the end of Attached sells that character out so bad. We'll leave it there for now. Picard. F. Now he goes up here. He's in the hate tier. I think he's a very good character. I mean, the performance is everything for Picard, right? If it was not Patrick Stewart, he's probably a much less interesting character. Picard and Patrick Stewart saved the show when it was at its lowest points, really. In the early seasons, he makes things watchable. I was just watching Measure of a Man, and he's probably the best thing in that episode. I don't think he's as interesting as Kirk. I think that he reflects TNG in a way that Kirk reflects TOS, but toning down the captain into the TNG captain actually makes them less versatile and interesting in a lot of ways, because he has to be a lower energy than Kirk was. I think he's really good. The performance is really excellent, but I think Picard it's weird that I'm putting in the A just because I think that he's somewhat of a letdown from the podcast watch through, where I sort of wonder if he's that great of a character. At least in terms when you're comparing him with someone like Kirk, who I think was really kind of an original sort of fully fleshed out through the movies and the series character. Picard never really feels like he hits that level to me anyway. So I think this ranking is appropriate. Data and then Picard feels right. Jordi. Jordi is very interesting here. I was like, I'm going to put him down here, but I don't think that's right. And I don't want to put him here because that seems sexist, that these two are actually worse. And I'm saying that somewhat ironically because is Jordi in this tier or is he in the C tier? What's the knocks against Jordi? He had a lot of horrible relationship episodes. He had his creepy thing going on for a couple episodes with Leah Brahms. He is friends with Data. That's a plus. The performance is good. If I were to pick one of these three to say who's the best performance, I'd probably go... He's probably the best performance out of these three. I think if I were to rank them, I'd put them like that. I think, does he belong there, or is he a C tier? I think he's one of my... I think he's a good engineer, actually. I think I'd like him better than Chief O'Brien and DS9. I think I'll put him there. I think it's a C tier. I'll leave these guys like that, I think. I think that makes sense. I don't mind Jordi, but Jordi always feels like a very secondary character in TNG. He's never really great in focused episodes. He works well as a character that they bring in to do other things with in someone else's episode, and I think he's strong in that regard. He probably works better than these two characters do down here. So I'll put him in the C, I think. He's not someone that really knocks your socks off, and you're not really super excited for a Jordi episode, but I do think he's a solid secondary character, unlike these two, who have a much harder time fitting in. So now Guinan. Guinan could potentially be an A, but I think it's more realistic to put her in the B tier, right here. And she's probably the best guest star TNG ever had, right? I think that makes sense. I think that's appropriate to put her, to say that about her. She's the most, she's obviously a replacement for Troy. She's Troy 2.0. She's the actual counselor character on the show who gives good advice and actually helps people get through their problems in a way that Troy never did. And every appearance she had, Whoopi Goldberg is really excellent. She's got that great tie into the Borg and Q. She is mysterious. She's interesting. She always had things to say. She's great in yesterday's Enterprise. I don't think there's enough of her to say that she's an A-tier character, really. And she's also a little bit mystical in a way that makes it tough to put them up here with these two. She's the mysterious nature gets in the way sometimes of whether or not you want to say the character is like fully formed or something, I think would be the way that I would look at it. I'm going to put her here. And I think she has to rank below Riker just because of sheer number of appearances and what's relatively important. It's harder to replace Riker than it is Guinan, I think, on the show at least. So Q is a high and a low guy, right? He's got really high highs and he's got really low lows. So I think a C is actually appropriate for him, and I would put him at the back right here. I think that works. Jordi actually belongs ahead of Chief O'Brien. Yeah, Q is great moments and really terrible moments, and he doesn't have a lot of in-between, and if he does have in-between, they're kind of boring episodes. When he is challenging the crew and making moral predictions and moral compromise, or like making people think about what the ethics of a situation is, how things would be different, or, you know, actually using the powers of a god to prove something, he's super effective. When he's the trickster goofball character that comes in and plays jokes on the crew, that's when he's at his worst. And the show pretty much splits him down the middle in terms of those appearances. So I think, for the sake of this argument, I'm going to put him right here in this C tier. Next up, Lore. Data's older brother. I always forget whether he was created first. Lore was created first, right? Because the people didn't like him because he was too realistic, so they made him make Data, who didn't have any emotion. Lore is a pretty bad character. I don't think he's ever been good. He's okay in Brothers. Is that enough? I'm going to put Lore down here. I'm never happy to see Lore. It's never a good time when Lore shows up. He's wearing his Pac-Led outfit, which I think is the brother's outfit when he gets rescued by the Pac-Leds and brought down. That was okay. He's in Descent. He's in Data Lore. He always felt like just such a 87 sci-fi genre show concept of a villain, like Data's evil brother who knows that he has an off switch and pretends to be him, and he has that goofy line about beaming a tree into space. I guess just to be the opposite of Data, it's thematically appropriate that he's exactly opposite of him, so I'm going to leave him right there. I would rather have Wesley Crusher, I think, than Lore in an episode, so I'm going to put Lore right down at the bottom. Warf. Worf was much better in DS9, right? I don't think anyone really argued. I think all characters, when they go to DS9, just because the nature of the show improves on their characterization, they become deeper. I think he's good in TNG, though. I'll give him a B. He's a weak B, I think, because he has a lot of garbage stories, too. For as many Sins of the Father episodes and things like that, he's got other bad Klingon heritage stories that they kind of felt like they were repeating themselves over and over with. So I think he belongs at the back end of the B tier here. This is where I'm going to sort of punish him. Guinan is in fewer appearances, but I think I just like the Guinan character on TNG better than I like the Worf character on TNG. Even though I do like Worf, I think that they set the groundwork for something good with him in TNG, and Ron Moore wrote a lot of good Klingon stories for him at that point. Tasha. This is going to hurt Clay for me to say it, but I mean, she didn't have anything, right? And then she came back. The only thing that's interesting about Tasha Yar is that even in death, she couldn't escape the horrible nature of her existence. I think I'm going to put her down here. I think she's better than Wesley, I think, in her limited appearances, but she just doesn't have any sort of mileage on her. It kind of annoys me that Denise Crosby still clings to the cast as if she was a part of the show, even though she left and demanded to get out, and now that it's a big thing, she's back. I just think that she's there's just not a lot to go with for Yar. The thing that's popping into my head now is her say no to drugs speech to Wesley, which is not really her fault or anything, but it's just bad writing. Or the rape planet thing. Her sister came and wasn't that good of an episode. And we're not considering Sayla or whatever. She's a key part of yesterday's Enterprise, but I felt like more of an apology for her horrible death in Skin of Evil than anything. So she's fine in that. I don't know if it bumps her up to a D. I mean, she'd be at the back of it. Just for yesterday's Enterprise, which is the greatest episode of TNG, I'll put her there. I think that just looks weird to have these three women characters in a row, but that's the way they were writing them. Reginald Barclay. Reg is okay, right? Reg is an interesting character on this show. He both feels like of the piece and not of the piece. Like he feels like he belongs and he doesn't belong. I really like his first episode, which is Hollow Pursuits, I think. Yeah, Hollow Pursuits, where he has the addiction to the holodeck. I think that's really interesting. They don't go far with it because it's TNG, and they say that he's actually just in there having fun instead of having sex with everybody he knows and shutting himself off from society. I think he's pretty good. I can never say I'm excited. He's always great as a secondary character. I don't know. In the nth degree, he's fine. I think he fits right here. I'm neither impressed with nor unimpressed with him. I'll put him in front of Q, actually. Who would I rather see? I'd rather see Barclay than Q in an episode, so I think that makes sense. I'd rather see O'Brien than Reginald Barclay. So I think that's it. Let's see if these work out. Data is the number one character. I agree with that. Then Picard. Then we've got Riker. Guinan. Worf. That seems appropriate. Jordi. I think that's right, just on sheer appearances. Then we got Barclay. Q. Troy. I don't even know if Q belongs up here now. I think Q makes sense being in the middle. I think I'll leave that there. Troy, Crusher, Yar, Wesley, Lore. I think that's right. I think that's it. What do you guys think? Agree, disagree? Where did I go wrong? Let me know. And that's it. I think that's it. Thanks for listening. Check out the podcast if you're unfamiliar, thepenskypodcast.com. If you want to listen to Star Trek podcasts, we talk about all the episodes. We've made it through TNG, TOS, DS9, and now we're on to Picard, which we're covering as it comes out. And otherwise, I'll be back with another DS9 cast list in a couple days. Thanks very much. See ya.